Welcome to the continued podcast adventures of three opinionated guys with mics and too much free time. Strong enough to stop a speeding movie rumor, more powerful than a bad comic book event, able to waste hours of time asking stupid questions to people who have better things to do. It's Dave, Ben, and John. It's Superhero Speak.
Hey everyone, you're listening to Superhero Speak, and I'm your host Dave.
And John.
And JD.
And this week, boys and girls, we have a special guest with us. She is a 5-time female wrestling champion, and now she is coming out with her own graphic novel called The Adventures of the Queen Bee. So everyone, welcome Madison Rayne. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on.
No problem. I think it was your artist reached out to me on Twitter.
Derick,
yes.
Yeah.
And he was very excited to get you on, and then I've been emailing back and forth with someone, I guess your representative.
That would be my husband.
Ah,
yes.
Okay.
We can call him representative, though.
That explains the excitement.
Cool.
Oh, yeah. Derick, he's the artist. He's kind of honestly the brains behind this whole project. I'm such a conceptual person that I come up with these ideas that are like way out in outer space, but then don't really know how to make them concrete, real things. Mm-hmm. And between Derick and Josh, my husband representative, they've really kind of done the majority of the work on this project, and I've just kind of given some creative input and fallen in love with it along the way. So yeah, I'm just as excited as they are, and I appreciate you guys having me on.
Oh, no, cool. So you're actually only the second wrestler that we've had on the show, and you're the first female wrestler.
Okay, who is the other one?
Brimstone.
Okay.
And he has actually a book called I think it's Brimstone and the Bloodhound Gang that he's had out for a couple years.
That sounds lighthearted and
oh yes,
and
very,
happy.
very much so. So I'm kind of curious. Was wrestling something you always wanted to do?
Yes, and then no, and then yes again.
Okay.
So I am the baby in my family. I'm also the only girl. I have 2 older brothers. Mm-hmm. So on Monday nights, every week, it was my brothers and my dad would sit down and they would watch wrestling. And I quickly figured out that was my way of like bonding with them and trying to fit in and be cool, even though I'm several years younger than both of my brothers, and they probably really just wanted me to go away. But I started watching wrestling with them from a very young age. Fell in love with it. I remember seeing Shawn Michaels for the first time and just like being absolutely captivated. And then when I saw my first ever women's wrestling match on television, I was like, holy crap, like this is what I want to do. I want to be that. And I was like 9 or 10 at the time. Mm-hmm. And so I was a diehard wrestling fan for many, many years, like through junior high. And then, in high school, like you go through that phase where like, if it's not cool, you don't want any part of it. So, I completely went the other direction. I did pageants and I was a cheerleader and I ran track and like did all of the girly things. So then I graduated high school and I just went to a local like community college with no real like athletic departments, and so I started training for a fitness competition. And again, something that I did with my brothers. Mm-hmm. And I walked into my local gym one day. Like I grew up in the smallest of small towns in Ohio, and so to walk into my gym and I saw a flyer for a wrestling show, and then kept reading and found out that in this little town there was actually a wrestling school that I had no idea existed. It was just one of those moments where it was like meant to be. And I went to the show. And then the next day I walked into the gentleman's school And I said, hi, I was at your show last night. I want to be a wrestler. And everybody looked at me like I had 12 heads. I was the first girl that had ever gone to the school and wanted to train. And I did. Like, I had a part-time job, and that's what paid my wrestling tuition. Mm-hmm. And I had just graduated high school that spring, so I was barely an adult. And that was the first thing that I wanted to do. Well, I was also going to nursing school at the time, and after training for a bit and like absolutely falling in love with doing the wrestling thing, I told my parents, so I can't do both of these things. I can't devote my time to it. I'm going to drop out of college and try to be a wrestler. I had a 4.0 in college, and so that was a trying time between my parents and I. But yeah, I mean, to answer the question that you asked me an hour ago, yeah, wrestling was something that I grew up kind of loving, and it was a special thing for me and my brothers and my dad to watch and do. So now it's kind of come full circle, and I watch it with my daughter, and I still watch it with my dad when I go home. And so, yeah, it's always been kind of ingrained in me.
Okay, so the last time I watched wrestling was back when King Kong Bundy was a thing. So
okay.
I am kind of out of my element here until we get to the comic book stuff. But wait, what is in wrestling school? I mean, like, I have this image in my head. It's something like what my brother described to me when he went through Marines boot camp.
Well, I've never been through a Marine boot camp, so I'm not 100% sure. But like, if you've ever seen, there was a reality show for many years called Tough Enough, and it was a WWE reality show, and it took a cast of men and women through like what it took to learn how to be a wrestler, and like you learn how to fall properly, and you learn how to run the ropes properly. And to somebody who doesn't know much at all about wrestling, that just sounds like, oh, okay, so you learn how to fall down and run. But those wrestling mats, especially, like, I started and I was 104 pounds, so it's all very unforgiving, and it's kind of like weightlifting. You have to train your body to be accustomed to the torture that you're putting it through. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, it's just like any athletic sport, I guess, that you would learn to do. You go to practices, you learn the basics, and then the more advanced you become, you learn different moves. And I mean, spoiler alert, I think everybody in 2017 knows that wrestling is it's not real. So you learn how to essentially, like, not fake fight. I don't want to say that and bury something that I love so dearly, but you learn how to take care of one another. It's a bit of a dance, and you learn how to execute moves and make them look really intense and very impactful, but at the same time, like, we're all wearing sparkly leotards, so we're not really out to hurt each other, obviously. So, like, you just learn. You learn how to dance with your partner in the ring.
From what I understand, it's harder to learn how to not hurt people than it would be if you were just learning to actually wrestle, I guess.
I think, and I can't, like, speak to this from experience, but I feel like maybe it is harder for somebody who might come from, like, an MMA background or an amateur wrestling background, because, they're trained to make more contact than what in an ideal situation you would as a wrestler. So, I know that there are a lot of crossover athletes right now coming from MMA and different martial arts backgrounds, and I think, or I would assume anyway, it might be a bit more difficult for them to retrain themselves on how to be slightly effective with their moves, but not to the point of actually wanting to hurt somebody, if that makes sense.
So, like, pull punches instead of throwing with your weight behind it and all that?
Right, exactly.
So it's funny you mentioned that, because I'm a big wrestling fan.
Okay.
I'm just sitting there listening, because I actually fell in love with pro wrestling as a kid, and it actually led me to amateur wrestling, which is what I do. I went to college as a college wrestler, and I'm a high school wrestling coach right now. So It's interesting
Uh-oh, did I lose you guys?
No, you didn't lose us.
Say that the amateur guys have a harder time.
Unfortunately, JD's in his car, and he doesn't realize we just missed part of what he just asked.
Yeah, I stopped being able to hear after you're a high school wrestling coach.
Yeah, I'm actually a high school wrestling coach driving home from practice right now.
Multitasking.
Yeah, you can see what's more important.
Yeah. I can get paid to coach wrestling. So anyway, like I was saying, no, I've heard like a lot of my friends that have tried to make pro wrestling talk about how difficult it is to kind of learn to hold back a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, and again, I
hurt someone.
Right. I think what he said is that he has spoken with people who find it difficult or who are basically in the situation that I spoke to about, like having to hold back a little bit and not, if somebody is several years into being trained as a professional wrestler and an amateur wrestler comes in and like literally like if somebody came in and threw me around the way that you guys do in amateur wrestling, I would probably feel like I did something to upset them. And want to sit down and talk about it and maybe hug it out over coffee. But no, like in all seriousness, I don't mean to make light of what I've done and what I've made a career out of. Because, it obviously it's an art form. It's a sport. It's something that, I've never had an off season in the 10 plus years that I've been doing it. So, it's absolutely a sport. It's just, we don't claim to be a full contact sport, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So you won you won a few championships. You've been doing this for that long, and this obviously leads you into comic books somehow. I need the kind of connector there.
Okay. Yeah, and the comic book world, if I'm being completely transparent, it's kind of new territory for me. Admittedly, I did grow up watching like the television series Batman, like with the actual actors, not the cartoon version. And again, I've had two older brothers growing up who have loved all things boy. So comic books have always been in my house. But more so than being a fan of comic books specifically, I found myself being a fan of like good versus evil and getting to like watch anything, movies or television or anything related to, getting to see the good guy and the bad guy. And then there's some kind of an altercation and 9 times out of 10, good prevails, right? So I guess that's how I can tie wrestling to comic books, because we're these larger than life characters on television. And most of the time, the story that we tell in a wrestling match is good versus evil, and the outcome is, it's a bit more 50-50 in something like wrestling. But the storytelling, I guess, for me, and the larger than life characters, and the fan base of either comics and or wrestling, those people getting to kind of suspend their disbelief for a little while and just kind of like tune out of reality and tune into something that's fun and, exciting. And that's the best way, I guess, that I can marry those two ideas together.
No, well, it makes perfect sense. Like comics and wrestling are pretty similar, and there's such a big crossover fan bases between them. And there's a lot of wrestlers that are kind of making the transition to comics. Like CM Punk's been writing with Marvel the last couple of years, and you go to a convention, there's always going to be wrestlers that are signing. So it makes perfect sense to me to go from one to the other.
Yeah, and I've done many, many signings over the years, and seen a lot of, like, I can't tell you how many times I've seen Lou Ferrigno at conventions and signings, and the cosplay thing is just, it's huge. Even wrestling-specific signings and conventions that I've done, it feels like there's always a bit of a crossover, like an overlap between the two fan bases.
Right. There's always someone cosplaying as Randy Savage.
Yeah, and Hulk Hogan, yeah, absolutely. John Cena.
Yes. So, so then you said that this was a concept of yours. How did you How did you hook up with Derick to do this?
So he has done some work. He's worked with my husband, who works for a company, Impact Wrestling, that I worked for 8 years. So there's kind of the storyline of how husband and I met, and he kind of oversees all things digital and kind of likes to put his hands into things like merchandise and helping create characters. And so he worked with Derick before I kind of got involved in the relationship. And I just recently, this year, left Impact Wrestling after 8 years of being with them. And it was for the first time in my career, kind of had all this freedom to do whatever I wanted with my wrestling career and my character, because my moniker for the majority of my career on Impact Wrestling was that I was the Queen Bee. I was Madison Rayne. I was the Queen Bee. I was obnoxious, and I was like the mean girl who was in love with herself, and I wore a giant tiara to the ring and like did the obnoxious royal wave. That was my character. It later somehow turned into I turned into the good guy and was still able to, like the wave kind of turned into, to a much lesser degree, the John Cena, like you can't see me, and I would see little girls like waving back at me. So it made the transition, the character did, to the good side. So then when I was no longer wrestling, I still, I was that moniker. I was that character for so many years. And I had people telling me everywhere I went to, like these smaller independent wrestling shows that I go to now, like, oh, I loved that character. I loved that character. And something like clicked with me, because for me, it was just, like I said, I had done pageants previously. And so that was, something that kind of just came naturally for me, is to like marry those two worlds that I was a part of together.
Right.
But then I started thinking, like, yeah, this is a character. Like, this is a larger than life character. Like, you don't see people walking down the street calling themselves the Queen Bee and wearing a giant obnoxious rhinestone crown on their head. Like, this is a character. And I just said to my husband in passing one day, I'm like, wouldn't it be cool, like, if the Queen Bee, like that character, was actually like an animated like bee? Do you think that like people would like that, or do you think kids would like that, or do you think that that would be in any way marketable? And that's why I say I'm conceptual. Like, I had this idea. I want to make my personality and my character a cartoon or an animated character, but then I don't know what I want to do with her.
Right.
He kind of thought on it a bit more and connected with Derick, and they created Madison Rayne, the Queen Bee. And it's literally this animated bee who's holding a scepter and has a crown on her head. And Derick drew the face of this bee to look just like me. The first time I saw it, I was like, oh my God, that looks just like me. And so at first we put it on a t-shirt, and I sold it on a wrestling t-shirt website called Pro Wrestling Tees. And for me, it kind of stopped there. And then Derick and Josh kind of got this idea of like, let's make this thing something. Like, let's make her a character and let's give her a world. And, and then it just kind of, it sort of started coming naturally. Like, the characters that she would face in this comic would be characters that I've wrestled, like people that I'm friends with who are also larger than life characters, and can also make that transition. And so it's not by any means like my autobiography, but it is a way to kind of keep this character that I've had for nearly a decade on television alive in a different arena, and hopefully like kind of grow the fan base and make it something that, you know, wrestling fans can get behind because they kind of know that character, but then like just the average like fan of comic books or fan of you know, action figures or whatever it is can be like, oh yeah, that's something really cool. And it's, you know, it's a female main character in a comic book. It's good versus evil. It's women's empowerment. It's sticking up for what's right. And so like, it's a kind of a warm, fuzzy comic. I don't know how much people are going to love that, but I hope they do.
So you mentioned little girls and children a couple times. Is that who like your target audience is?
I would like for it to be.
Okay.
I have a 4-year-old daughter, so in everything that I do, I try to make it like fan friendly for her.
Right.
So at the same time, my husband is a huge comic book fan. So going through this process, I can get his opinion on things as an adult, but then I can also show her a picture of all the characters and be like, hey, do you think that she's pretty? And do you think that this character is mean? And so I get feedback from both kids and adults, I guess.
No, I mean, that's good. As a parent, I totally understand wanting things to be family friendly. We actually have friends of the show, HB Comics. They have a comic out that's called Laser Man, which they strive to make sure that it's family friendly for, you know, kids of all ages. And you know, they say that it's tough because a lot of comic fans look to older, you know, titles nowadays, but you know, that's what's important to them. So, you know, I think it's great that other creators want to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess to answer your question, yes, that is kind of my target audience. And I'm hoping that maybe more than just children will jump on board and like it too, because I know that my fan base as a wrestler, as a performer, it's a good mix of adults and children. And I've worked really hard to make it that way. You know, I think a lot of people still, unfortunately, hear women's wrestling and they think, oh, bikinis and you know, like what females in wrestling used to be many years ago. Right. So, and I also think like I'm not going to get on a soapbox about this, but there's just so much negativity like in the world, and being in a position where I have a bit of a voice. You know, I have a pretty strong social media outreach, and I feel like if I can use that in ways that are like positive, you know, there's obviously going to be battle in this series, and there's going to be like the main villain in the story is a spider, but her character is based off of one of the girls that I've wrestled with for many, many years, and you know, she lives in dark dungeons with rocks and bugs and all of that dark stuff. So as I'm explaining all this, you can kind of see that it's not like gory and graphic and like the main villain is a bug.
It's Rush, right?
Yes. Yeah.
No, I'm cheating. I'm looking at your Kickstarter.
Oh, okay. But yeah, Rush is there's a character on Impact Wrestling. Her name is Rosemary, and she is a demon, and she will probably contribute quite a bit creatively to this project because her mind for creativity and her character specifically is just phenomenal. And she has created her character, and it's one of the most successful characters on the program, on Impact Wrestling. And so before she went to Impact and started wrestling on television, she was this like demonic, dark character under the name Courtney Rush. So we collaborated with her, talked to her, got her thoughts on it. She loved the idea. So that's what I would like to do eventually, is kind of incorporate more characters that wrestling fans will recognize and will know, and hopefully bring them along, as well as create a new fan base of people who may not know who I am or what the Queen Bee is, and they just see this comic for something that's fun and enjoyable to read.
Cool.
I can vouch. That's one of the coolest things on Impact. She's freaking awesome. I'm excited to hear that, actually.
Yeah, she's gonna, as much creative input as she will give, I will receive, because she's, and she'll be good at giving me ideas for my character, for the Queen Bee character too. She's just, her mind for creativity and this kind of stuff is just, it's exceptionally good. So, there are a lot of hands in working on this project. And so by no means can I take even half of the credit, because there are so many people who are giving their time and effort to this. And I'm kind of just falling in love with it and occasionally throwing out an idea and hoping that everybody doesn't think it's completely ridiculous.
I'm sure that it's not.
We like comic books.
Exactly.
Our threshold for ridiculousness is very high.
Exactly. So I was going to mention, John mentioned the Kickstarter. So you guys, you get together, you say, here's the idea, let's turn it into a comic or a graphic novel, and then you decide to do it independently, and you have a Kickstarter going,
Yeah, again, something that is a bit of a foreign concept to me, and Derick, the artist, kind of captained that ship and explained to Josh and I that Kickstarter is a great way for graphic novels and comics specifically to kind of have a launching point for getting them in people's hands quickly, and also kind of cuts the cost out of him and us producing this mass quantity of books and then hoping that people want them. So the Kickstarter thing was something that was kind of new to me. And, we set our goal really, really high, because there are some graphic novels on Kickstarter that are backed by hundreds of thousands of dollars. And I don't know how, and I don't know what that process looks like and how they became that wildly successful. And I was hopeful that maybe that would be that we would catch lightning in a bottle that way too. Unfortunately, I don't think that we're going to reach our goal in the time frame that we set on Kickstarter. However, everybody who has backed the project already, if and when we get to our deadline and haven't met our goal, we have all of those people's contact information. We get their email. And so I will be reaching out to everyone personally. And, if this thing doesn't reach its goal, letting them know, it's still coming. That was just our first attempt at getting it in people's hands, but it's by no means going to stop production on them. We are aiming for an early February, having everything done and ready to go and ready to be purchased through a different platform. What that is, I don't know yet. I just started my own little online store with my wrestling merchandise, so I don't know if maybe we put it on there, but I know that February is what we're aiming to, or when we're aiming to have a date for when it's actually going to be released. I know that it's going to be released both in hard copy and digital. We've already got merchandise, stickers and 8x10s, and Derick is going to do, I think, a couple pieces of artwork to sell that is, he's going to draw up the characters, and we're going to sell all that stuff, and we're going to try to really market all of these characters and this brand. And my hope is to make it something big, but even if a couple people buy it and love it, and then for me that's a win, right? Because we created something brand new, and we took this concept from a female wrestler and turned her into a bug and made a comic book out of it. So it's a win either way is how I'm looking at it.
And then, go ahead. John?
Yeah.
I said, go ahead.
Hearing is usually a win, turning people into bugs is just.
You can't go wrong there, right? I mean,
no.
Again, I have a 4-year-old, and I've seen the band, the Beatles, and are now like the concept for a Netflix cartoon called Beat Bugs. So like I've seen it done. I know that people like it because I've had to watch it. So I know that it works.
Yeah.
I know that it's fitting, based on how my wife and daughter react to spiders, that's the villain.
Right? It's perfect. Mm-hmm. We have Terminex here on a regular basis to make sure that none of those villains get in this house.
So once the book launches, are you planning then to hit the con circuit next year?
Yeah, I'm already kind of getting the wheels in motion in that. And, I've never actually been to a Comic-Con or anything that was specifically geared towards comics. Most of what I've done convention-wise has been some form of wrestling or like everything entertainment involved type of convention. But I know there's one that I just recently became familiar with called Heroes and Villains Convention, and it's Stephen Amell, Arrow, the comic Arrow. A lot of those guys are there. And while I'm not a massive comic book fan, I'm a massive fan of that show. So it would be an awesome experience for me for many reasons to go there and do that. And again, this is something that's a bit foreign to me, although it kind of runs parallel with the wrestling business. So I'm hoping that, between Derick and I do have an agent who works out of LA, who is familiar with a lot of this kind of stuff, the comic book convention specifically. So I'm hoping that in 2018 I can get out there and meet people and get this novel in people's hands and have them love it and have a good time with it.
Strangely enough, at some of these Comic-Cons, we do see wrestlers at them.
Right.
So
yeah, I mean, it really, I feel like it is a natural progression to implement some facets of wrestling into a comic book series. I mean, a lot of what wrestlers do, we learn how to wrestle and that's one thing, but if you can't connect with an audience and you can't make this character larger than life and make thousands of people who are buying tickets come and either want to really cheer for you or really boo you, then you're not doing your job. And, that parallels with what a comic book does, right? You want to cheer the good guy and hope that he wins, and you want to boo the villain.
Right. I mean, it's funny because my wife always described wrestling as not what JD does, as soap operas for men. And then when comic book shows started becoming more popular, like The Flash and Arrow, she's like, they're like soap operas for men. So
see,
they marry very well together.
Yeah, they do. And there's just off the top of my head, there's a character, a wrestler, who was the Hurricane in WWE, Shane Helms. He worked at Impact Wrestling with me for a few years, and his character is literally a superhero. He comes out with the mask and the green cape and everything, and people love him. Kids love him. Adults love him. Like, every age of wrestling fan loves him. So it really is in my mind, and what made me want to do this comic book and really put a lot of time and effort into helping it grow is the fact that it does feel so natural, and it does feel like, if I can take this character that I had for so long in a wrestling arena and just that quickly in my brain turn it into an animated character. And then within a couple weeks, 3 or 4 of us are working and have the framework for this, first book of hopefully many. That's another thing, like when you do something that is in any way, you're trying to pull in an audience, you want to make it easy to understand, right? You want to make it very relatable. And I feel like that's what this is going to do, because the character, the queen bee, Madison Rayne, is so like positive and happy, and she lives in bright colors, and she's friends with a fox and a bunny. And then Rush, the spider, lives, like I said, in dirt with other bugs and darkness. And so it should be very easy for people to understand.
Right. So do you have any fear that people won't take you seriously? Won't take the comic book seriously because of your association with wrestling? Or do you not think about that because, you're just the wrestling fans, you will be an actual audience for this?
I don't ever worry about people not taking me seriously. I mean, I'm the age that I am, and have made an exceptionally good living off of being a professional wrestler who travels the world and wears spandex and has these matches with her friends. Like, so when I talk to my friends who are now like lawyers and doctors and do things that are very, honorable in society, and I'm still doing like professional wrestling, I've never worried about people not taking me seriously, because by doing something that people don't really generally take seriously, I've traveled to places in the world that I didn't know existed.
Right.
So no, I understand that what we're doing, like, it's not like blood and it's very different from probably what most comic books are. And there's not a lot of, it's darkness, but it's not really.
Right.
And it's probably going to get over more with a younger fan base. And I'm totally okay with that.
Right.
So, if wrestling fans look at me and go, wait, you built your career, this successful career, and now you turned yourself into a bug. Like, I don't care. I really don't care. I have no shame. Like, if one person, if one little girl or one little boy reads this thing and loves it and then wants to buy a Queen Bee sticker to put on their backpack, like, I'm happy. Like, that's a win for me. So,
cool.
I'm not, none of it, like, we're all doing this, hoping that it's wildly successful.
Right.
But at the same time, like, it's fun. It's a fun project. It's something totally new, for Josh and I, and thank God Derick, loves it too, and thinks that it's a great concept, and it's different enough, it's unique, that hopefully it'll resonate with the comic book fan base.
Cool. It's a great attitude to have. No, definitely. And I was just, sometimes you worry when you go out to do something new, and you step outside your comfort zone. Sometimes people are like, oh, I don't want to do that. But it's great to hear that, you're not worried about that. And I think people that would want to do something outside their comfort zone should have the same kind of attitude.
Well, I think too, like you guys said at the beginning of this, we're all so excited about it. When you guys spoke with Derick and then you talked to Josh, like, there was so much excitement behind it. So we're just excited to do it. And if we're that excited, it must be something pretty good, right? Like, we wouldn't get that excited about something that any of us are looking at and going, yeah, this is really mediocre. So, there are going to be people that don't like it. And, there are people that don't like the way I wrestle, or there are people that don't like professional wrestling. That's okay. Like, not everybody's going to love it, but hopefully enough people do that there is a reason for us to create a second installment of this, because I've already got ideas of who I want to be on my side and who I want to be my allies. And so now that it's kind of started and Derick has really brought it all together for me so I can see it visually, now I can kind of take the ball and run with it and give him new ideas and collaborate more than just sitting back and going, yeah, guys, good job. I like it.
Right.
Well, that's the thing about this. You don't need everybody to get on board with it. Like Tyler James in Comics Launch always talks about your 1,000 fans, your true 1,000 fans. And with a self-distribution model, all you need to do is find the right people and the right niche to fit into. Whatever anyone who's not into what you're doing, they don't matter anyway, because they're not going to be into what you're doing. So just focus on the people that are going to get excited for it. And if you're marketing it toward kids, go with that. Go all out with getting it into their hands. Because anyone who's not into the idea, they're never going to be. So it doesn't matter anyway.
Yeah, exactly. And, there are, because it's so, I don't want to say, like, it's not cheesy. Like, it's very cool and it's very detailed, and the pictures and the concept is very detailed. But we're bugs. Like, we're forest creatures. So, the possibilities of how to market this stuff, they're endless. There are going to be, there could be action figures and plush toys and, that's what we get excited about, thinking about the possibilities when people fall in love with it, not if people hate it.
Right. Cool. So in the beginning, you talked about your brothers and being the youngest of three and falling in love with wrestling because of them. Are they jealous now of your success?
No, they're not. They love it. They think it's super cool. They sometimes tell me to wrestle in pants instead of like shorts or skirts. But no, like they're not jealous at all because they loved it as fans. Like it was never anything that they wanted to do.
Okay.
My oldest brother was like well on his way to playing professional baseball. Like that was what he loved doing. Mm-hmm. My other brother loves like getting his hands dirty, and he loves it. He can tell you literally every piece of a car down to like the very last nut and bolt and what they all do. And I couldn't know less or care less about that. So we all had these other things that we really loved, and wrestling was just my one that I kind of took off with.
Cool.
Yeah.
So you talked about you saw your first female wrestling match at 10. Who was it? What match did you see that made you fall in love with it?
It was Alundra Blaze and Bull Nakano.
Man, that's the same one. That was the first female wrestling match that I remember seeing too, growing up.
Yep, and it was the one, I still remember this like it was like yesterday because it wasn't that long ago. I'm not that old. Bull Nakano was the champion. Alundra Blaze came out. She won the championship, and then that big giant woman, Bertha Faye, came out and attacked her. And I was 10, and what I was watching was so easy for me to comprehend and understand. The pretty blonde who everybody was cheering for just got beat up by the two like darker, villainous looking women. So again, from a young age, like I've loved that good guy versus bad guy story.
So you're done with Impact now. Like you're not with them anymore. What's next? Like, do you see yourself continuing to wrestle? Are you going to kind of like fall back and kind of focus more on developing these properties, or kind of what's the future with you?
I would say that 2018 is going to be very busy for me, both with wrestling and hopefully with developing these characters and this comic series. Am I done wrestling? No. And I thought maybe for a brief moment when I left Impact that maybe I was, but no. I recently had the opportunity to go to the WWE Performance Center in Orlando, had a tryout with them. That was amazing. I've been working a lot for Ring of Honor, another huge and up-and-coming wrestling promotion. They've been around for, I think, 15 years. And I am not contracted with Impact, but have gone back and wrestled a couple times with them. So I guess across all platforms, I'm kind of just doing my thing and seeing what I fall in love with the most and what I want to do the most. And my parents are so happy because I'm also in the midst of all of this going back to nursing school.
Wow.
So yeah, I'm doing everything. And then whatever one thing I fall in love with the most is probably where I'll invest a little bit more time. But, I'm fortunate enough to have the time and the energy to do everything. Until I can't do everything, I'm going to keep doing everything.
So that's cool to say. Like, I'm curious though. Like I mentioned I'm a fan, so now I'm going to get my fan stuff out. You've been with Impact for a long time, and Impact's been a crazy company as far as like changes in leadership and direction and ownership goes, especially the last couple of years. What's that been like? Yeah, I mean, like, just as a fan, you read these things, you're like, this is for the comic folks who have no idea. Like, what's it been like on the inside, kind of dealing with the craziness that is Impact?
Yeah. For about a year, for the majority of, the end part of 2016, into the beginning part of 2017, I was wrestling, but I was also on the creative team. So I was helping develop some of these characters and writing for the show. And in that sense, like being in the on like the back end of it and not just performing, it was a little bit stressful because I was in the trenches and I'm there in the office every day. But it wasn't stressful in the sense that, we thought that the company wasn't going to continue or succeed. Like, that's just where media kind of blows things out of proportion. Not just with wrestling. I mean, that's what the media does, right? But it was more stressful because people were reading that, and because the talent was reading that, and they were reaching out and they were concerned. And so I never, I was there for so long. And people, from shortly after I started, until just this past summer when I left, they were always hating on the company. They were always saying like, oh, well, it's not going to last. And it always does, because it's a good product. It's a solid wrestling product. It's an alternative product to WWE. And I think that wrestling fans like that. They like to have options. They like to have something else that they can watch. And as long as you're putting out a good product, they don't care what's going on. Like, I don't care what happens behind the scenes on Arrow. I just want to like Arrow, and I want to watch the show. So I think that real wrestling fans just wanted to watch wrestling. And that's what we focused on. That's what we thought about, not, the internet saying that the lights weren't going to be on in the studio to film television, because they always were. They always were. But in another thing, like, the talent has always, despite their concerns, during those weeks of tapings or those days of television tapings, everyone banded together, and everyone was always so positive and had a positive outlook, and that made it easier to forget what the internet was saying. Does that make sense?
Makes complete sense, especially like having watched the show for years. Like, I know the times that as a fan I enjoyed it the most is when it didn't feel like it was trying to do what WWE did.
Yes.
Like, that was when I was super excited to watch Impact. Like, when Matt Hardy was doing basically whatever he wanted on the show, those were the funnest times to be a fan of it. And so it's been, as a fan, it gets kind of crazy because all you hear is, well, this is happening, and the show seems to go in a million different directions, and it gets hard to follow sometimes. So I was just curious to hear what an actual person on the inside who lived it day to day was saying about it.
I mean, and the company is 15 years old. So in the grand scheme of things, it's not that old. Like, it's still going to have growing pains for probably a few more years. I mean, how old is WWE? And, they're a solid multi-billion dollar company, but they've had a lot longer to figure things out and to go through those, roller coaster moments. And, Impact's going to do it. Ring of Honor's going to do it. Like any company, any wrestling company that's like up and coming, if it's not WWE, you're essentially going to compete with WWE, and in some places you're going to fall short. So, as long as everybody just focuses on what they're doing and making the best television product they can, I think everything's going to be fine.
Well, and that's what's crazy too, is people talk about how Impact's been around for 15 years. WCW only existed for 12.
Right.
Impact has been around longer and has stayed profitable longer than WCW ever did. And it's been the horror story of, it's going to go out of business any day now. And I've heard it as a fan for at least a decade. And I couldn't imagine how it is to work on it, and everybody seems to be rallying against you.
Yeah, I mean, all I can say to that is none of the rumors that people have ever put out there did I ever experience. Like, I never didn't get a paycheck. I never was concerned that television tapings weren't going to happen. It's unfortunate that social media can't rally behind the company the way that the talent rallies behind the company. But I don't know that it's done going through its growing pains, but it's certainly going to keep growing. The ratings aren't slipping any. They're not hurting really. There's great talent there.
That's such an antiquated argument anyway. When people talk about ratings, they say this thing about WWE, like, the ratings are down from where they were 15, 20 years ago. People consume media so differently now than they used to. So, I mean,
right.
I don't think that's going to be a huge problem. Is your husband still with Impact, you said?
Yeah, he is. Mm-hmm.
And he works, what's his job? He's in the digital market? I didn't know your husband was with Impact, so I was just curious as to what he does behind the scenes with the company.
He does everything. So what I think he's most recognized for is that he's the color commentator on the show.
Oh, okay.
You were married. What's that?
I didn't know that you were married to him. That's news to me.
Yes.
I try to.
Surprise!
I don't read the dirt sheet stuff like that. So I didn't know that.
Surprisingly, we've managed to. Our names haven't popped up much on dirt sheets over the years, so we're either not doing anything exciting or we're doing everything right. I don't know, but so he's the color commentator. He also is the vice president of digital, so he runs all of the digital platforms, and he kind of puts his hands everywhere because like I did for so many years, he's got so much faith in the company. And before he was at Impact, he spent I believe 13 years at WWE. So he knows good product and he knows good talent, and he sees it at Impact. So, again, I just keep going back to the same, the company is, I'm no fortune teller, but the company, in my opinion, is going to be fine. The talent there, they're happy. Everyone's happy. They love what they do. And I think that transcends onto the television screen. The performances are good. The content is good. So yeah, I mean, it's the company. Everything's going to be fine. People need to stop being so negative on social media.
Let's focus on happier things. Who was your favorite person to work with when you were at Impact? Who did you get in the ring that you enjoyed your most time with?
Earl Hebner.
Really?
Yeah, I know that's not what you meant, but
no,
Earl,
that's awesome that you said that.
Yeah, I adore him. He was literally the first person that I met the day that I went to, it was TNA at the time, for my tryout match. He actually drove me from the hotel over to the soundstage, and couldn't have been a nicer guy. And I always call him my wrestling dad because he always took care of me on the road. He always made sure that, all the girls were taken care of, and he's such a good-hearted man, and I adore him. I will always adore him and value the time that I spent with him on the road and in the ring. As far as wrestling, I've been so lucky. Like I've had such an awesome career. I've gotten to wrestle with, she was Tara at Impact, but Victoria, from WWE, Mickie James, Gail Kim. Gail's amazing. I would say probably Gail definitely pushed me outside of my comfort zone the most, and helped me grow the most. But I just had such a good time there, like with everybody, even like the current roster of females that I only got to work with for a short period of time. Like the one thing about Impact that I think has been the most consistent throughout all of the highs and lows is its women's division.
I 100% agree with that. The Knockouts division is, when the WWE was just doing like the sillier aspects of women's wrestling, TNA was doing real women's wrestling, and it was athletic and fun to watch. And so I'm just kind of cool to hear you praise Gail Kim like that, because she was someone I've been a fan of for a long time. So it's neat to hear that. What is the favorite angle that you've done in the company? Is there like the focusing on the creative stuff? Like, is there something in particular, like a storyline that you really like taking part in that kind of sticks with you?
I mean, I have to say being part of the faction, the Beautiful People, because it was so big. Like, maybe even ahead of its time, because you watch WWE now, you watch Raw and SmackDown, and they've got these factions of women. It's stables of 3 women, and they're running their women's divisions, and that's essentially what we did 8-10 years ago. And from the moment that I started at TNA, like I got to be a part of that group, and I got to, experience such success with Velvet and Angelina were the two other members, the 2 other women that I got to wrestle and travel with. And it was fun because they were like the mean girls. We would put paper bags on our opponents' heads, like, because they weren't pretty enough. So it was fun because that's not me generally. Like, I try to be a good, nice person. So it was fun to kind of turn that on and play that role. And from that, either organically or accidentally, I'm not sure, came the Queen Bee, because it wasn't written for me. It wasn't scripted for me. I just said in an in-ring segment one night that I was the Queen Bee of the Knockouts division, and that was it. From that moment on, I was the Queen Bee, and that was, again, like 8 years ago. And here we are today talking about the Queen Bee is now the main character in a comic book. So I guess maybe that moment was my favorite in hindsight. I didn't know what it was going to be at the time, but now that I do, that's probably a highlight for sure.
What's your favorite part about pro wrestling? Is it the actual working the matches? Is it being on the mic and pushing the storyline stuff more? What connects? What do you connect with more?
I don't know. I've always said that my strong point in wrestling has been the character part of it. Like, I've always been athletic. I think that I'm a good, solid wrestler. I think that I can wrestle and have a pretty good match with just about anybody. But what has been the most fun for me is creating characters, but like both for myself and then years after I had created a character for myself, getting to do it briefly as part of the creative team at Impact. But when I was little, I was in plays and I was in drama club in high school, and for whatever reason, I always had to be the center of attention. Maybe it's because I was like the youngest and the only girl, and had to figure out ways, like watching wrestling, to get people to pay attention to me. But I've always enjoyed being a character and being in the spotlight and talking. And I know that some people are absolutely terrified of public speaking, but give me a microphone and I'll talk for 20 minutes. So that's probably been the funnest part for me, because as a fan, I remember like it was in those moments of the wrestlers talking and not so much just wrestling the matches that I would connect with them and that I would decide whether I liked them or not. So I feel like it's a really important part of what professional wrestling is, especially now. Like the characters are almost more important than the matches.
Would you go back doing more creative role type stuff, as for like helping book angles? Could you see yourself doing that more in the future? I know you were on the Impact staff before this previous year. Could you do that again in somewhere, you think? Was that something that you enjoyed doing, like helping kind of guide the storylines yourself?
Oh my God, 100%. I loved it. I loved every minute of it. I excelled in my college English classes, but I never wrote television. I never wrote scripts. I never produced TV. And that opportunity was given to me by, at the time, the head of creative and talent relations, John Gaborik. I went to him. I said, I think that I would be really good at this. And he said, okay, if you think you can do it, I'm not going to baby you. You're going to jump in and you're either going to sink or swim. And I did, and I loved it, and it was challenging, and it was fun. And I remember I wrote an entire 8-week storyline that ended in January of this year with a massive wedding on the show with, I think, 8 or 10 of the wrestlers were involved in this 8-week storyline. And I remember at the end of that wedding, which was like the final scene of the story, everybody came back to the back and they were so excited and they all had so much fun. And for me, that was almost as rewarding as any match that I've ever had, because, you know, the characters and the performance was all theirs, but being able to give them the framework and the platform to do that and to have that much fun, that was really rewarding for me. That proved to me that I could do it and I could do it well. And if given the opportunity, I would absolutely do it again. 100%.
So, speaking of fans and being creative, let's bring our fans back a little with some more comic book talk.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah,
No.
I'll go off on a tangent about wrestling. Sorry.
Makes two of us.
I'm just curious because you said your husband's a comic book fan. You have a young daughter, so I assume you've seen some of the superhero movies at this point. Do you have a favorite character?
You know what? For hours before we started this interview, I was terrified that you were going to ask me that question.
Well, mission accomplished.
Okay. In total honesty, I have watched many of them, but have not paid attention to a lot of them. I loved Wonder Woman. We watched Wonder Woman just recently. I really liked, you guys tell me if it counts, but because it seemed to me like it was more of like a comedy. I love Deadpool.
Oh yeah, no, definitely that
Who
counts.
doesn't?
I thought that was hilarious, and maybe that's why I'm kind of not worried about my about this Adventures of the Queen Bee failing, because it's not the same. It's not, but it's funny action comic, kind of like what I thought Deadpool was. I liked laughing throughout that movie, but then, you know, there were also the action scenes. I can't remember watching one that I was like, oh, I didn't like that. But I would say if I had to pick one, and I know that it was just recent, maybe that's why it's popping into my head, but I really liked Wonder Woman. And again, it's probably like the women's empowerment, and my daughter told me one time, she came home from preschool and said that she told her teacher that she wanted to be a wrestler like her mom when she grew up. And I said, oh, really? Why? And she said, because you're like Wonder Woman. So maybe I'm a bit biased, and that's why. But yeah.
No, hey, that's a perfectly legitimate answer. You also mentioned you were a fan of Arrow. Now, are you a fan because you really like Arrow, or are you a fan like my wife because you like seeing Stephen Amell without a shirt on?
My husband is probably going to listen to this at some point, so I'm going to plead the fifth.
Okay.
Yeah. I really do enjoy the show. And Josh and I's good friend, who is also a very, very successful wrestler, Cody Rhodes, had a guest role in an episode of Arrow. And so that was really cool for us to see too. But I mean, it's a fun, exciting show. And, for all the wives who watch it, there's just that little bit of like a love story that makes it okay for us to get through,
right.
too. So it gives everybody in the house something to watch for.
Right. Exactly. Cool. So
I need to talk to your wife. It sounds like she and I would get along really well.
I think so. I actually do.
My wife
cool.
would join you guys well.
Let's do it. Let's plan it.
So, we're getting, we're kind of at the end here. So there is a normal question we usually like to wrap up on. And, that is, how do you measure success?
Oh man. Do you guys listen to the Lewis Howes podcast? No.
Nope.
Okay. No. Okay. He's like a motivational speaker, and every guest that he has, he asks them, how do you measure success? So you guys will have to figure out who started asking that question first. How do I measure success? I guess I just gave myself this answer a few minutes ago when you guys asked me if I was afraid of, failing or people not taking me seriously. And I think that success comes in doing something that you love and getting to a point where you're not worried about that. No matter what it is, if it's something as crazy as professional wrestling, or, if you want to be the head crossing guard at the high school, like whatever it is, like I feel like success comes when you wake up in the morning and you love what you do and you don't care really what other people's criticisms or feedback is going to be. And I know that sounds a little cheesy, but it's what I've experienced more so than traveling the world and having a passport full of stamps and getting to see all these amazing places and all these arenas full of people. Like, that's all been incredibly rewarding. But I think the most successful things that I do are the things like teach my daughter that she can be whatever she wants and wake up and be mom and not care if anyone looks at me because I haven't washed my hair in 3 days, or like,
right.
I feel like success is what you want it to be and what you're happy doing. And when you get to that point where you are happy and you love what you're doing and you don't care what other people think, cool. It's freeing.
No. Right. No, I love that answer. I want to keep doing this podcast every week if I thought I cared what other people thought.
It's 2017, and unfortunately, everyone has a voice thanks to social media, and a lot of people use that voice for negative reasons and to criticize and critique. And if I took to heart every mean thing or every criticism that anyone has ever thrown at me in my career, I would be a shell of a human being. But you can't do that.
Right. No, cool. So I'm going to ask you now, where can people find you online, and where can people find the comic book?
Yeah. So you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram, just at Madison Rayne. It's RAYNE. I've also got a YouTube channel, but admittedly, I haven't given it a name. I love being creative. I can't be creative enough to think of a name for my YouTube channel. So you just go to YouTube and search Madison Rayne. My channel comes up there too. And that's where I like to try to provide people with updates on wrestling and the comic and everything. So that's where you'll probably get the most in-depth, up-to-date information about what and when. And also Derick and Josh and I have started a Facebook page that is also just facebook.com/Madison Rayne. So across all social media platforms, you can just find me at Madison Rayne. And, in the coming weeks, again, I'll be giving everyone a lot more information. I actually just got some merchandise in the mail today to start getting out there, so people can start getting excited about the comic. I've got some stickers and 8x10s and different things that I'll start promoting very, very soon to hopefully get people excited and want to order in February when the comic is officially done and ready to be distributed.
Cool. And as of the day this is going to be posted, you have 13 days left on the Kickstarter. I will have a link in the description below so people want to go check it out, get more information, and you can pre-order. You can back the book, and that's like getting a pre-order of the book, right? So. Yep,
you can back it. Again, if we don't reach our goal in the next 13 days, that's okay. I will get everyone's email who does back the project, and I will personally reach out to everybody and let them know what the next step is and how they can get it, and make sure that their copy is definitely reserved for them.
Cool. So before we wrap up, JD, do you have any more questions?
No, I'm cool.
Okay. All right.
Thank you guys so much. This is a lot of fun.
Oh, no, thank you for doing it. Thank you for reaching out. Yeah, this has been fun. And maybe you can come back on when the book actually hits the digital shelves and maybe bring Derick with you.
Yes, let's plan for that sometime in February, early to mid-February. Let's try to get that confirmed. That would be
cool.
That would be fun.
All right.
I would love to hear Derick's take on all of it too.
Yes. All right. Well, boys and girls, thanks for listening. And as always, don't let your cape caught in the door. Have a good week.